Some Pokemon cards get all the attention. Others somehow disappear into the background even when there's something special about them. And the strange part is, a few of these cards are hiding in plain sight. So let's take a look at 7 Pokemon cards collectors keep passing over, and by the end, I think at least one of them may completely change the way you see it. So let's start here with a card from a set that I think a lot of collectors have mostly moved on from, Astral Radiance. In fact, quick question, can you remember the biggest chase card from this set? No? It was the Machamp V Alt Art card. And that is part of the problem for this card right here, the Origin Form Palkia V. Astral Radiance never became one of those Sword and Shield sets collectors constantly revisit, and when the set does come up, Machamp usually takes most of the attention, but I think this Palkia deserves another look. The first thing that stands out to me is the perspective. The staircases seem to lead in different directions, the buildings don't always follow normal rules, and depending on where you look, the entire scene seems to shift around you. And it kind of reminds me of an MC Escher piece, a world where gravity and perspective are no longer fixed. And that makes perfect sense for Palkia, a Pokemon associated with space itself. This is what makes this more than just a good looking card. The visual concept belongs to Palkia. And you couldn't just place any legendary Pokemon in this scene and have it carry the same meaning. The impossible architecture works because Palkia is there, and yet, even with artwork this thoughtful, the card remains overshadowed by Machamp and buried inside a set many collectors struggle to remember clearly. For Sinnoh fans and legendary Pokemon collectors, this already has obvious appeal. But I also think it works for anyone who appreciates unusual perspectives or artwork with a real concept behind it. Astral Radiance may not be the most memorable set, but this card absolutely deserves to be remembered. Next is a card that breaks from one of the hobby's usual assumptions. When collectors look through a modern set, we tend to expect the biggest chase to be one of its rarest cards, normally a special illustration rare card, right? That's supposed to be the premium tier, the textured card, the harder pull, the card sitting near the top of the set list. But Paradox Rift didn't really follow that script, because the card collectors ultimately pushed to the top was this Groudon illustration rare. And it's not the special illustration rare card. That is what makes this card so interesting. Groudon had to compete with every special illustration rare in the set without that higher rarity label, the texture, or the prestige normally attached to that category. And yet, it still became the card people wanted the most. Once you look at the artwork, it's easy to understand why. Groudon feels enormous. The entire landscape appears to react to its presence. The smoke, the heat, the volcanic light, it all creates this overwhelming sense that Groudon is not simply walking through the environment, it's changing it. And that power is communicated through scale rather than a generic attack pose. The scene makes Groudon feel like a force of nature, which is exactly what the Pokemon is supposed to represent. Now, Paradox Rift is not a set that comes up very often when collectors discuss the defining releases of the Scarlet and Violet era, but this one illustration rare managed to outgrow the set around it, and I think that says something important. Collectors care about rarity, of course, but sometimes the Pokemon and the artwork are strong enough to override that hierarchy completely. For Hoenn fans, legendary collectors, or anyone that likes artwork built around scale and atmosphere, this is one of the clearest examples of a card earning its status rather than simply inheriting it from its rarity label. The most impressive thing about Groudon here isn't that it became the chase card of Paradox Rift, it's that it did so without even being a special illustration rare card. The third card is one I think a lot of collectors recognize, but may not fully appreciate. This Zekrom from the original Black and White set here, and of course it does have its Reshiram counterpart, but what makes this card important goes beyond the artwork. Zekrom and Reshiram helped introduce the full art Pokemon card format to the card game. Now today, full arts are so common that it's easy to forget how different these chase cards looked at the time. The artwork covered nearly the entire card. The traditional background was stripped away, and the presentation felt much more dramatic than the ultra rares collectors were accustomed to seeing. The design, it also fits Zekrom perfectly. Its dark body, the black composition, and the silver highlights all connect naturally to the visual identity of Pokemon Black. It is simple, but it has presence. And in 2011, this didn't just look like another chase card, it looked like the beginning of something completely new. The problem is that the artwork later became much more familiar. Celebrations reprinted the card, allowing new generations of collectors to own the same design. And while I think this was a great tribute, it also made the original version feel a little less distinct. More recently, Black Bolt introduced a new Zekrom EX with the elaborate scene, texture, and premium presentation modern collectors tend to chase. That leaves the original squeeze between two things: the much cheaper reprint using the same artwork, and a newer Zekrom that may look more impressive by modern standards. But neither of those can replace what this card represented. It was part of the moment when full art Pokemon cards first entered the card game, giving it a level of historical importance that I don't think its current place in the hobby properly reflects. And depending on condition, the original can still be had for around $100, which feels surprisingly approachable for a card with this much significance. For Unova fans, legendary collectors, or anyone interested in the history of how modern chase cards developed, this is more than just an older Zekrom. It's part of the blueprint for what came next. Collectors may know the image, but I think a lot of them are ignoring the original card's place in Pokemon's card history. Card number 4 comes from a set with almost the exact opposite problem. Crown Zenith is not forgotten. If anything, it simply has too many memorable cards. The Galarian Gallery is packed with gold legendaries, popular trainers, evolutions, Mewtwo, and some of the best artwork from the entire Sword and Shield era. And when a set is that deep, even a card can disappear into the background, and that is exactly what happened to Hoopa V. There's a lot happening in this scene. Hoopa is surrounded by treasure, coins, and objects being pulled through the rings. The artwork feels crowded, but in a way that fits Hoopa. And Hoopa is mischievous and predictable, and its entire identity is built around those rings to move objects and sometimes cause trouble. And it takes that concept and makes it into a complete scene. And that is one of the things I really like about it. It rewards you for slowing down and actually exploring the artwork. But because Hoopa is sitting inside Crown Zenith, it has to compete with cards collectors immediately recognize as major chases. So instead of being treated like one of the set's standout mythical Pokemon cards, it often just becomes another affordable Galarian Gallery hit. And that is what makes the price so surprising. This is a mythical Pokemon with detailed full art artwork from one of the most celebrated special sets of its era, yet it can still be had for less than many cards with much simpler artwork. Now, that does not mean it is guaranteed to become expensive. It just means that affordability and quality are not always the same thing. Sometimes a card remains inexpensive because the set around it gave collectors too many other places to look. So for mythical Pokemon collectors, Crown Zenith fans, or anyone who enjoys artwork filled with little details, Hoopa V deserves another look. It wasn't ignored because the card failed. It was ignored because Crown Zenith gave it almost no room to breathe. Card 5 is probably the strangest card on this list, and honestly, I don't know even whether I like it or not. But I mean, that is like a weird good complaint, because this Eevee card looks almost nothing like the polished, adorable Eevee cards collectors usually chase. The proportions are exaggerated, it's got a weird expression, the whole design is like ridiculous. But that's also kind of why it works, because Eevee is one of the most collectible Pokemon in the hobby, and it has no shortage of great cards. You have your elegant ones, emotional ones, cute ones. This one doesn't even try to compete with any of those on those terms. Instead, it gives Eevee a huge head, tiny body, a weird expression. It doesn't feel like a premium chase card. It feels like someone took the idea of Eevee being cute and tried to just make it absurd. And that's probably why collectors overlooked it. It was widely available as a promo, so there's no chase involved. You're not opening packs hoping to pull it. And because the artwork is so unconventional, it's easy to dismiss it more as a novelty rather than a card worth collecting. But being strange is not the same thing as being forgettable. In fact, I think the opposite may be true here. Because there's plenty of Eevee cards that look better than this one, but I'm not sure there are many that are more memorable than this one. You could show this card to anyone, bring it up later, and they would know exactly which card you were talking about. It has an instant identity, and I think there's a lot of collector appeal in that. But it's also a good reminder that promos can be hurt by their own accessibility. When collectors can obtain a card easily, we sometimes assume it must be less special, but how a card is distributed doesn't determine whether its artwork is creative, distinctive, or worth collecting. So for Eevee collectors, promo collectors, or anyone who enjoys cards with personality, this one deserves more attention than it gets. It may not be the most beautiful Eevee card, it's definitely not, but it might be one of the hardest to forget. Card number 6 comes from one of the most famous modern Pokemon sets ever released, and that is exactly why so many collectors, they overlook it. Evolving Skies is remembered for Umbreon, Rayquaza, the Eeveelutions. Those cards became so dominant that almost everything else in the set was pushed aside, including this Golurk V Alt Art card. What makes this card stand out is that Golurk isn't even fighting in it. He's helping to build something, which sounds simple, but it gives us a glimpse into everyday life in the Pokemon world that many major chase cards don't offer. Golurk isn't being presented as a giant weapon or some crazy ancient machine. It's just showing it how it might exist alongside people. And it's enormous, but the scene doesn't treat it like a threat. Its size is useful, and it feels like a small moment from the Pokemon world we don't normally get to see. But when you release a card like this, besides some of the most desirable alt art cards ever made, it's almost impossible for it to compete for attention. Collectors open Evolving Skies hoping for Umbreon or Rayquaza or maybe one of the other Eeveelution cards. Golurk becomes the card people notice only after the biggest chases have already taken over the conversation, and that's a shame because judged on its own, this is a really thoughtful piece of artwork for this card. So for collectors who enjoy environmental storytelling, underused Pokemon, or cards that show ordinary life rather than another dramatic battle, this card deserves another look. It may never be the card that defines Evolving Skies, that's obviously Moonbreon, but it might be one of the cards that make the sets feel more alive, and I think there is value in that. The final card is one I think collectors sometimes dismiss before really looking at it. This card has several other versions, so this one gets treated like the basic copy. It's the Reshiram and Charizard GX card from Unbroken Bonds. But because it's the regular GX version, it's usually not treated with the same regard as the others. It's not the full art, it's not the Rainbow Rare, and it isn't even the popular promo card. It's the version people seem to settle for until they can get one of those rarer, more expensive versions. And yet, I think this may actually be the coolest Reshiram and Charizard card of all of them. What I like so much about it is the composition. It feels explosive, both Pokemon are setting off their attacks, and there's a real sense of partnership between them. The contrast between their energy and fire gives the card a strong visual identity, and neither Pokemon overwhelms the other, making a really nice balance. And the strange part is, this regular version is overlooked because it's easier to obtain. Collectors are always trained to move up on the rarity ladder. The full art is supposed to be more desirable, the Rainbow Rare is supposed to be more impressive, and the promo is supposed to feel more special. But rarity tells you how difficult a card is to pull. It doesn't automatically tell you which version has the best artwork. And in my opinion, this regular GX captures the pairing better than any of the other versions. It also represents something larger that I think the hobby underappreciates. Tag team cards were one of the most inventive ideas that the card game ever produced. They gave collectors countless combinations that had never appeared together on a single card before. Some of the pairings are obvious, others unexpected, but they made each card feel like an event. Now that collectors are so focused on these alt art cards and illustration rares, many regular tag team cards are treated like second-tier versions. And I think that misses what made the era so special. This may be the basic version of the card, but basic definitely doesn't mean boring, and sometimes the card collectors pass over is the one that captures that idea the best. These 7 cards are all being overlooked for different reasons, but I think they prove the same thing. Collector interest doesn't always follow rarity, price, or popularity as neatly as expected. Sometimes the most interesting card is buried in the wrong set, it's overshadowed by a flashier version, or dismissed because it's too easy to obtain. So which Pokemon card do you think collectors are ignoring right now from this list? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.